Studio. But as we do every Thursday here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, we like to welcome in Bob Whitcomb, Go Local contributor. Around the corner.
Hello, Kate. How
Nice
are you?
to see you again.
Nice to see you.
It's
Good
the
to see you.
dueling
I've got
notes.
my coffee here to offset this dreary day.
And you've got your notes on the card.
I do, yeah.
I feel the same way because I'm so digital. If I can find a piece of paper, that's where I'm actually
Oh yeah,
maybe
paper's
jotting
good.
stuff
Paper's
down.
high technology.
It's actually it's a tablet.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a fake tablet, made to look like paper.
It's a fake tablet.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I was
that.
looking at the column that you'd written last weekend.
Yeah.
Being published on Sunday. So much has happened with the Paw Sox
Yes,
since then.
that's
Now,
right.
but there were some salient points there before we go into the developments of this week that I want to talk about that you had raised. One of them in particular was addressing the issue that folks have been addressing for a while now. You know, just how popular is baseball going to be?
Yeah, which direction
in 10,
is it
20
going?
years?
In that case, Larry Lucchino, as chairman of the POSAC, sent me something indicating that the baseball remains very popular and has a good future. Other people have taken issue with that. They think it's declining. It's an interesting issue around here because you have a lot of Hispanics. A lot of Hispanics, of course, like baseball, but they also like soccer. A lot of Southeast Asians, the kids in the public schools and the private schools play soccer. Soccer's the big game. So you kind of wonder where that's going. Certainly for the American public in general, football's the big game, I think, professional, NFL football and basketball. So there's a big question is, where is baseball going? I think Larry, who's a very nice man and a tough businessman, said, no, this is still the great American sport and will continue popular forever. A related issue with that, and that brings in issues of how much revenue is going to come in to pay for the deal. The related issue, and a very important issue in any public facility issue like this, is what else can you do with the money? What's the opportunity cost? And what troubles me is the media and citizens in general never seem to get to the opportunity cost issue. That is to say, what else can you spend this money on?
And that's
Like
especially
fixing the bridges, the roads, cut taxes, cut business taxes. All these other alternative expenditures of money. And I'm always surprised that nobody ever seems to bring that up. Because you're talking about, way north of $100 million over the life of this thing. So maybe, I don't know, maybe a baseball stadium is the best way to spend this money, but it would be nice if people thought of maybe there might be some alternatives. Business claims the taxes are too high. How about cut their taxes a little bit?
You would certainly hear that from certain angles of certain constituencies
then maybe
here.
with the money, they'd hire more people. I don't see the roads as being great. I know Gina Raimondo is trying to fix them, but looking out the window, it still looks like Lagos and Monza.
You always invoke some sort of third world country.
Well, yeah, I've spent a lot. I've spent quite a bit of time.
Reference when you're in here in the studio, but
Yeah.
when you wrote the piece this past weekend, and if you don't read it, go check it out every Sunday. Bob Whitcomb's column is up on Go Local. You seem to think that it probably might have a better chance of passing this time around than back in 15.
Yeah, it's a better deal. Andrew Zimbalist, who's a big expert in stadium financing, says this kind of thing is a pretty good deal. I'm not sure.
But there's a big but. We saw what happened. The governor came out very supportive on Monday after Commerce, but then Tuesday, Senate President Dominic Ruggiero basically said, not enough time.
Right.
Not going to happen this session. Were you surprised when you heard that from him?
A little bit, especially because we know that the administration, the Raimondo administration, has been apparently negotiating this thing since February, which is a little odd. I didn't realize we were going that far back. And I'm sure Mr. Lucchino is very angry. He felt that he had been left out to dry. And we said in the green room, I remembered a scene from Watergate when John Ehrlichman, who was one of Nixon's henchmen, they put out somebody to take the fall for one of the aspects of the Watergate scandal. And he was talked about as hanging slowly, swinging, slowly in the wind. And I sort of thought of the mayor in that. I think he may have felt misled or betrayed.
The mayor was quite, I was there at the press conference yesterday at the State House. I would say quite angry. I think that he was upset that they had come to this point in time, again, haven't gotten indications from the governor on Monday.
After weeks of conversation. And the bill, again, whatever you think about stadium financing deals at all, the deal's certainly better, or less bad. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. It's less bad than earlier deals, and that one they were going to do over here between RISD and Brown, that would have been a fiasco. But still, I just wish the public conversation would focus. I keep coming back to this. It will cost X millions of dollars. What else could you do with that money?
Well, considering that we're at least $134 million in the whole of this current year.
Right.
Last time you were here, we always talk about your prognostications of the potential
Which
for
are
something.
always 100% accurate. That's why I'm a
Well,
traitor.
you had one, I think you had Trump's
That's right.
impeachment at 30%,
Yeah,
and you had the ballpark at 50%. But now,
Yeah.
given the indications that we've seen this week, chances of the session
40, well, it's not going to happen this session.
What about a fall session?
I think there will be a fall session.
Okay,
if
what
I had to
do you put
guess.
the chances on a fall session at?
40%.
40% chance of a 40% chance
yeah.
of a shower in a
Much
fall
lower,
session.
Lower. I thought this thing was going to go through, but I think it's falling. It's falling.
Well, I'll tell you, the mayor was out yesterday. The head of the building trades, Mike Sabatoni, who was
Sure.
actually here just the other
He
week.
basically lives here. He's got a room back there.
He came into the studio following that kickoff
Yeah.
event, making
Yeah.
a case for it. But we'll see what happens. That was just one of the many things you touched upon in your column this week.
I think one other thing on the policy, I think there may be, in general, a dwindling public liking of these projects, of these kinds of projects, not only here but around the country.
And you say these projects, we're talking
These
ballparks?
big public-private projects like this, or projects that involve helping out a private company.
Well, that seems to be a lot of the pushback I saw,
Yeah.
especially from organized groups and on social media, took affront
Yeah.
with the private ownership, the very wealthy private ownership.
Yeah, I mean, there'll always be public-private, cooperative arrangements, but I think in this kind of thing, especially involving the entertainment business, and baseball is part of the entertainment business, I think there's more and more skepticism.
Well, let's move on to another piece of your
Sure.
column last week that I found very interesting, and I want to just pull it up here. You went a little further south. You went south of the Mason-Dixon line.
Yes, that's right.
You were talking about the controversies in the South, and
Right.
especially New Orleans, with removing statues of.
I've changed my mind on that. I thought as an old history major, it'd be a good idea to leave these statues up in public parks. Now I don't think so. What changed my mind is I've been thinking about it a bit more. By the way, I interject, I have Southern relatives.
Well, it was very.
Tennessee.
And you said you were going to
Virginia.
touch base with them.
Yeah,
It was
I
what?
haven't yet because they have guns.
It was Jefferson Davis. It was PGT Beauregard
Right.
and Robert E. Lee. of
Robert E.
course.
Lee, yeah. And I think the problem, what focused attention for me in this was the statues they took down in Eastern Europe of Stalin, Lenin, people like that, after the Soviet empire fell apart. Now, of course, it's being reconstituted under a different name. But when this empire fell apart, the aggrieved populations, the people who have been brutalized by this homicidal dictatorships, pulled down a lot of these statues. And why not do the same thing with the figures of people who were supporting this horrible crime of slavery? And the best example is Robert E. Lee, who's sort of revered because of his dignity, his intelligence, and everything. But there's this great quote from Ulysses S. Grant, which I think I put in there, which is, he was asked after what do you think of what do you think Robert Lee said? Well, he respected his dignity and intelligence and all that, but no man ever fought for a worse cause. And if I were a black man, I would not particularly want to see a statue of Jefferson Davis, who was also a traitor. Details.
But that's what I like about your columns. You get outside of Rhode Island. You get.
Well, that's because I've been evicted.
No. You're still here. We're keeping you here
that's
for the time being. I know you've got your notes, but I do want to hit on one last thing here. You made an interesting point. Attorney General Jeff Sessions making the case to federal prosecutors to ask for the longest possible jail sentences for drug-related offenses.
I think this is a big mistake. Most of these are victimless crimes, except for, of course, the people are taking the drugs directly. I think we'd be much better off if we started to medicalize this more. And the other thing that occurred to me, not that anybody would ever accuse me of being cynical or suspicious, is that these big things in the South called for-profit prisons, and this is a way of keeping them filled.
With the prison industrial complex?
Yeah,
What?
you bet. It's a great business. I'd like to set a couple up here too.
Well, I hadn't known that Sessions had made that directive
yeah.
about those drug sentences.
Yeah.
So again, always learn something when I read your column.
Yeah.
What's coming up this weekend? What do we have on
Well,
the
we
tablet
see
over
the
here?
budget, the chaotic budget, all presidential budgets are sort of fantasy land. The creative accounting, crazy projections. This takes the cake. This is just ridiculous. They're projecting average growth in the gross domestic product of 3% as all these baby boomers are retiring and productivity is plunging. It ain't gonna happen. And it's filled all these absurd numbers. And nobody will take it that seriously. They'll do something to it in Congress. I don't know what. Another thing I want to mention, and I thought Trump did okay on his wanderings abroad, but he's in a sleeping bag with all these Arab tyrants. And he doesn't believe in promoting the idea of the United States as a beacon of liberty and democracy and human rights. The problem is when some of these tyrannies get overthrown, then we'll be on the wrong side after having sold them all these weapons.
So
it sort of reminds me of Iran in 1979, or the Shah's side, and then we gave them all these weapons. And it reminds me of the great line from Lenin, which you may have heard of in college, which is, the bourgeoisie will sell us the rope with which we'll hang them. And we're selling them all this stuff, $100 billion of stuff to the Saudis, which is a terrible tyranny. It's actually worse than Iran. The difference is, so far as we know, they aren't developing A-bombs yet. We don't know. So we're totally in bed with Qatar and all these really vicious monarchical tyrannies, and saying they're our allies. And we can't overthrow all these governments, but can't we at least show a little reserve, a little dignity, and express American values without thinking we can change everything?
What do you have to say to what the indications
Big
he's
mistake.
been making on his foreign trip? The continued rhetoric, if you will, against ISIS, especially with what happened last week in Manchester.
Well, I think I know what's going on there. ISIS is sure a lot less threatening than the Chinese, the Russians. So I think one reason he's focusing so much on ISIS, not to defend ISIS, obviously, who are criminals. Basically, it's a large criminal group. Is that it's a hell of a lot easier than confronting the big threats to the West, which are Russia and China. See?
Well,
all of which have lots of nukes.
ISIS
does not have nukes, but
you're right. He was making the statements, but he's been making them through the campaign.
Obsessed with ISIS.
But this week we had it with Manchester.
Yeah,
it was very much
terrible. It was awful. It was hideous and all. But again, it's really a giant police thing. I always thought that 9/11 should have been treated as a giant criminal act instead of an excuse to go to war against the Middle East, at which we're still living with the effects of that. It turned out to be catastrophic. We unraveled the world. We opened the Pandora's box. So I think the president will keep hammering away at ISIS because ISIS is terrible. B, it's a nice distraction from the perils posed by the dictatorships of Russia and China.
Well, we'll see. Anything else in that notepad for this coming weekend?
Frontier Airlines coming in. That's great. This
speaking
is
of
great
coming
for the Raimondo administration.
Do you know that we've got the Rhode Island?
I've heard that.
We've got
his plane wasn't late.
No, Iftikhar Ahmad is in the office right now. Okay. I saw him come through the door. We're going to talk about
hot air balloon.
No,
but this is
from
great. This is great news. And the other thing, extremely important, the public should know about, bobcats are making a big comeback in southern New England.
Really?
Yeah. So this is great. So watch out about leaving your pets outside.
Yeah.
Including your cats, because your cat is bound to be smaller than the bobcat.
Have there been bobcat sightings in Rhode Island?
Yeah. They're all over the place.
I just see the coyotes.
You're going to be doing interviews with them in a week or so.
No, Molly. Well, Molly's the animal
Okay,
expert,
she's the animal.
so Molly's got the bobcats.
Okay.
She's going to be very, very careful.
So,
well, Bob, I appreciate it as always.
All the best.
Wish you a great weekend.
You too.
We will see you soon.
Sure. See you soon.
And of course, the world is bound to change in the week
change.
until we see you next week.
The old British Prime Minister Harold Wilson said, "A week is an eternity in politics."
That
now it's a day.
Now it's just a day. Bob Whitcomb, thank